Good morning. It is 9 a.m. and the time posted for our work session in the Board of Supervisors hearing room. Any item on this agenda is open for discussion. Roll call. District 1,
Crosby's here.
District 2,
Supervisor English is
and
present.
District 3. I'm Supervisor Judd for District 3. Members of the public may also attend this meeting via Microsoft Teams computer or mobile app or via phone by calling 602-609-7513 or 888-680-6714, conference ID 343275266 pound. If you have trouble accessing this meeting remotely, call 520-432-9200 for direction. Work sessions are a time for county staff to inform and discuss agenda items with the Board of Supervisors, and public comment will not be taken. As far as introductions, today we have two special guests sitting in the front of the room. Recorder David Stevens and our elections director Bob Bartlesmeyer. Welcome. So today we're going to have one item for discussion, and it's actually discussion and possible direction regarding administrative and supervisory authority over the elections department after the agreement for election services with Cochise County Recorder David Stevens terminates on September 7th, 2023. And I'm going to open the discussion by Richard Karwachka, County Administrator, and then we will discuss that.
Just to give a little background information, on February 28th, 2023, the board and Recorder Stevens signed into an agreement. And then on June 9th, 2023, Recorder Stevens sent an email stating that, which was effect his termination notice, and which is stated here, ends September 7th, 2023. So at this point, and I think there was a little confusion about what happens after September 7th, 2023. So I think it's open for discussion as to what the board's thoughts and ideas moving forward after September 7th, 2023 should happen with the oversight regarding the elections department. And as you mentioned before, Mr. Bartlesmeyer is here and Recorder Stevens.
Thank you. So I'm going to open it to the board members. I'm just going to say I kind of took that email to heart, figured that we'd just go back to normal, back to the way it was run before, with basically the clerk overseen by the board, with the help of Mr. Karwachka, obviously, overseen. I guess that was the right word. It's still bothering me. And I didn't really put much thought into it, as I appreciate Mr. Stevens for all the work he did and keeping us together and getting our election taken care of. That was very important, and you did a lot of good work. I know in our office, it made it a lot easier to say, okay, Mr. Stevens, you're now the elections director. Thank you. And then Bob Bartlesmeyer has come in, and we're pleased to have him. And the board has welcomed you and voted to take you in, and we're grateful for that. And now you're both certified to do the job. Thank you. That's good. Right, David, isn't that what you did, that certification? So you have that certification for being able to do elections as well?
Yeah, that was
certification.
Taking the job to get through the election. I was already certified.
Right.
They do recertification probably in October.
Okay.
We don't have dates yet, but
all right. So basically, I just want to recognize you that you're both here and ready to do the job and help in any way you can. But Mr. Stevens effectively will be stepping down as the interim elections director, and all the things that agreement said that we had signed. So I don't really have a lot more to say. I'm fine with that. I'm happy with the new elections director. I'm happy with Mr. Stevens being a partner in our elections, as he always had. And I know he's not going to run away or hide. He's going to continue to be a partner. So
is that an option?
Huh? To run away and hide?
To run away and hide?
Well, I guess, but I would expect that you will stay engaged and do your job. Thank you. All right. Okay, so to the other board members, whoever would like to go first.
I'm looking at paragraph 2 on page 2 of the agreement, delegation of administrative responsibilities. Mr. Stevens, would you care to look at that and tell us what the changes were in your duties with regard to implementing paragraph 2? We have a slide that by any chance.
Can you put paragraph 2 up there?
Paragraph 2, page 2 of the agreement. This says agreement between Cochise County Board of Supervisors, Cochise County Director, County Recorder. So basically, what's mentioned is personnel and budgets is 1, receive nomination papers, number 2, and 3 is other. So if you would care to tell us about under this agreement, what will change as we go back to a different system?
And Supervisor Crosby, just to be clear, is it paragraph 2 that starts on page 1 and goes into page 2?
Let's see, is it? Yes, it is. You are absolutely correct.
Okay.
It says delegation of administrative responsibilities, and it is page 1, paragraph 2. Forgive me.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Let me start off with the goal for accepting this was to get us through the May election and to restaff the election department. And when those were successful at those points, I decided to resign out of that position. But what's listed as delegation of responsibility was everything needed to get us through that process. Now, one thing that we've continued on is we have 2 special elections coming up in November, and the planning for those have already started. So that was actually not part of this agreement in my mind, because we didn't know what was going to be in the November election at that point. We now know it's Benson and Wilcox, working hand in hand with Bob here and the other 2 hirees. We are processing through that election cycle. I think we have ballot language. We're getting ready to approve the ballot styles. We've done that last week. There's going to be 3 styles going through. I don't know if you need to know all the specifics on the job works, but the goal was to, when I left, to have it go back to as normal as possible with the people having those responsibilities, having them back again. Any questions on that? Happy
Sure.
to answer.
How about number 2 was receive nomination papers. So going forward, you will not be receiving nomination papers.
No, typically that's the election department, and they will be receiving those. We did receive a few candidates running for office, process those and put them through.
Okay.
We haven't had any lately, so.
Who will issue certificates of election?
That'll be the election director.
Okay. Down at the bottom of that, it says the second to last sentence, recorder shall be responsible for all other election functions, including ARS Title 19 duties charged to the Board of Supervisors or other county officer in charge of elections. Can you go over what the difference is between the Title IX duties charged to the Board of Supervisors versus other county officer in charge of elections, since you were going to be in charge of both of those, and now it's going to split again?
It's going to go back. It'd be easier to tell you what I do as recorder. Title 19's initiative, referendum, and recall. And the bulk of my work will be signature verification. Any filing of those will be through the election department. And then there's a process that when people initiate an initiative, turn in the signatures required, they'll go through the elections process first, make sure pages are complete, they're signed, and if they are deemed with enough signatures, they'll be sent over to the recorder's office, and we will verify the signatures that are needed to be verified.
Okay. Mr. Bartlesmeyer, are you clear on the last 2 sentences that we're looking at there and what your duties will be going forward? Do you have any questions on that? Are you going to tell us, or?
Well, I think David spelled it out real clearly. My job, or our job in the elections department, is to accept the petitions, make sure that the number of signatures is adequate to what was required. Then that is transmitted over to the county recorder's office for verification of those signatures to meet those guidelines that's required. And then we will report the findings of it to the party interested in the recall or the referendum or the initiative, party or parties.
Okay. Looking at the second to last sentence again, we have the recorder shall be responsible for all other election functions, including ARS Title 19 duties charged to the Board of Supervisors or other county officer in charge of elections. So with Mr. Stevens stepping away from the responsibilities delineated in both those persons or bodies, the Board of Supervisors or other county officer in charge of elections, which is now you, are you clear about what we're doing going forward based on what Mr. Stevens has said?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay. So the other issue that's the major change is the supervision by Mr. Karwachka and the Board of Supervisors versus only by Mr. Stevens. Isn't that correct? Is
Yes.
that what we're doing? Okay. So how would you describe the supervision currently or the interaction between yourself and Mr. Bartlesmeyer right now before we make any changes?
Was that directed for me?
Sure.
Right now, everything he does goes, he notifies me of the process is going forward. Some of that is our normal business anyway. Like I just mentioned, the November election, determining the ballot styles. He's working with my chief deputy on that. So that type of work won't change. But going forward, that would be my limitations on future elections, where his process would be through the board or Mr. Karwachka.
Would you repeat that, please?
Sure. Right now, there are continuing works that are happening between the election department and the recorder's office that will continue going forward on primarily special elections. It also applies for Title 19 initiatives or referendum recalls that we work in hand to develop the ballot language, or not the language, but the ballot styles. We have in our system the special districts that he will need, information he'll need to develop the ballot styles. For instance, it's kind of interesting that there is a small overlap between Wilcox and Benson of 11 people that will actually have both questions on the ballot. Those kind of things, we have those answers for, and then we will continually work with the elections, as we have in the past, to develop whatever needs to be done to provide for the elections.
Okay, so when you're talking about ballot styles, and in this case, you mentioned a group of people that they happen to overlap in those districts. Is that what you're talking about with ballot styles? In other words, when you get your registration card, it'll say such and such a precinct, point such and such, delineating it down however
Correct.
many slots it needs to be to say, okay, there's 11 people that match exactly this quote about ballot style. So when we're talking ballot style, that's what we're talking about. A small group of people that all are in the same district or districts.
Correct. The county is divided up into precincts and precinct parts, and each of those parts have their own district. For instance, the school board is a precinct part. The hospital district's a precinct part. Could be a fire district. At first look, you wouldn't think Benson and Wilcox would overlap at all, but there are 11 people that do. So we have created a third ballot style for this election in November. So those 11 people will have both questions, but we also only have one question.
It'll be on the front. There'll be an issue on the front, and then the other issue will be on the back of the ballot. So they won't be getting 2 ballots, they'll be getting 1 ballot.
Sounds good. Okay, let's see. Do you foresee, should we foresee any problems in splitting from the hand-in-hand description of your duties that you just mentioned, moving to or back to supervision under Mr. Karwachka and the board? Is there anything that, okay, here's a potential problem, this might happen as a result of moving back to what we were prior to a few months ago?
I don't foresee a problem because it's the way it worked before up till 7 months ago. And I wasn't aware of any problems before that. So I don't foresee any problems going forward.
Okay, I don't have any more questions.
I didn't come with a lot of questions, but I'm grateful that you're here, and thank you, Mr. Crosby, Supervisor Crosby, for your input and questions. Does Supervisor English have anything she'd like to?
Well,
Hey.
in your opening statement, you mentioned about the clerk, and I wanted to say that we have not, in the time that I've been here, the clerk has not had a primary role in elections, and so it has been the county administrator who has been in charge of the elections department, and so I just wanted to clear that up. I know that we could do that, but that hasn't been, what's been happening in the past. So I just wanted to clear up that. I think we had no problems with the delineation of having the county administrator oversee any of our departments, because it would be very unwieldy for someone to have to answer to the board in particular, because we can only be a board when we're sitting on this dais and acting together with an agenda so that the public is aware of everything that we're doing. So out of an abundance of caution, we always have an agenda when we're together to make decisions. But all the departments work day by day, and so they have things that come up hour by hour, and they need to have someone to call when there is a problem. So yes, I do believe that we need to go back as closely as possible to the structure that we had before Mr. Stevens came forward and took over both of the responsibilities for elections. So that will be what I'm looking for, is let's move back to the way it was working before, because we didn't have any problems.
And that did remind me of something. So the special districts, their day-to-day operation, and obviously their elections, they were contacting the clerk directly at one time, not Mr. Karwachka. So, and that is something that specifically caught my attention initially when we passed things over to Recorder Stevens, and now who is that responsibility going to go to? Because that is written right there.
So special districts have, from the outset, and I do have a resolution from a while ago, that the elections and special districts is run by the director or the manager back then of elections. That hasn't changed.
Oh, okay.
So I think the question is always, what part of special districts are you talking about? So let's say just recently we're talking about the tax rates. Well, Mr. Bartlesmeyer is not helping with the tax rates. You have our budget manager, Juan Frisbee, and our treasurer, Kathy Trawick, assisting these special districts in putting that information together to file. And then, however, as Recorder Stevens mentioned and Mr. Bartlesmeyer, there's an election coming up for special districts.
Obviously, that's elections.
That's elections. That's not going to be handled by the clerk of the board. And most of the questions that were happening that were sent or asked by the clerk of the board were open meeting law violations questions. So I think, and the clerk of the board is not an attorney, and regarding that advice and questions, I think we can help and assist the best we can, as we always have. But when we talk about filings and with elections, that still goes with the director of elections.
Okay. I just remember when I was learning the job, you learn on the job when you get elected to a position like this or hired in a position like yours. You learn on the job. And I remember Miss Rios, who was the clerk of the board at the time, saying all special election, all board, all of our smaller districts, fire and all those kind of questions. She had a list. She had like a spreadsheet of all of the little water districts and fire districts. And she said, they call me for help. They would go directly to her. And so I think I carried that muscle memory into them calling Mr. Maddox. And I imagine you always became involved then. So it really is you. And then you would refer them to the attorneys or their own attorney if it's open meeting law, and then whatever's appropriate. Elections, if that's, or Mr. Frisbee.
Correct. And we always recommend that the special districts consult outside counsel regarding that. And we, like I said, we try to assist them and point them into where they can find information regarding that, regarding the ombudsman or the attorney general's office. So yes.
But they would contact you then, not
They
the
would
clerk.
contact me. They would also contact the clerk of the board to try to get those
Okay.
answers.
Okay.
The clerk of
So
the
that's
board,
why I was
yeah,
confused
the
by
clerk
that.
of the board keeps the information for each one of the special districts because they have to come to the board in order to form a special district.
Mhm.
And they have to inform the board of things. Well, who is the keeper of our records? That's our clerk. So naturally, the clerk has a list of who's on each board, et cetera. And they have copies of how it was formed.
Mhm.
But they don't really have anything to do with it except to keep those records.
All right. So this clarification is just because we passed that responsibility to Mr. Stevens, that responsibility to keep the districts organized and field questions and things, and now it's coming back. So you don't, if that bothered you at all, it's coming
No,
back
it was
to our
with
end.
the elections director is where we passed it in our resolution.
Okay.
The elections director.
And if I may, it was easier in the other structure just because, with the clerk of the board or having those conversations with our budget manager or whatever, or the elections director, they were all underneath the county administrator,
Okay.
right? Where the board was clear in the direction of moving all the elections to the recorder's office. So the only proper method was you still had duties regarding special districts. So that's why it was written that way. And according to the past resolutions too. So.
In all fairness, I have close to, 80 or so special districts in my district. And I get a call from someone almost every other day. So that's why I have always been concerned about, where to direct them. And usually I can just kind of talk them through it and pass it back to them because now I know. But I've always sent them to the clerk. So, and then I realized this last little while I was supposed to send them to Mr. Stevens, and now back to you guys. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Some may recall that I'm frequently looking for an exhaustive explanation of how things are supposed to work. And I do not sense that we have an exhaustive explanation of the duties of the board of the clerk of the board versus the elections director. Even though we've talked about it a little bit, I do not sense an exhaustive explanation of that. And I appreciate such an exhaustive explanation of it. As Ms. English noted, she mentioned issues of not being present as a board, but that is cured by more meetings as a board. So that doesn't need to be a problem in any sense as far as I'm concerned. And as far as no problems existing in the prior system, I would remind everyone here that the problem was the announcement of the jail tax election as an all mail-in ballot prior to the issue being brought to the Board of Supervisors, and which is the subject of a lawsuit among some other problems that are also there. So let's see, I think I got one more comment. We could talk about terminating the agreement with Mr. Stevens either sooner or immediately or as soon as possible instead of when it expires in September.
I
I
believe
see.
that would have to be placed on an
I
agenda.
understand.
So
Is that what we want? Do we have consensus?
September is pretty soon.
That's coming right up, huh?
September 7th, is that what it was? I'm sorry, we have to ask that.
That's when
That
it
is correct.
expires.
Oh, right here, September 7th,
I
yeah.
have it on my countdown calendar.
It's on the agenda item for today, so we're good.
12 days,
September
yeah.
7th.
13 minutes.
Okay, but it doesn't sound like we're gonna get there any faster
No.
by doing anything other than just waiting
That's right.
for it to expire.
But thank
Okay.
you for thinking of that because that is a possibility that we might have wanted to address. I don't think we could talk him into extending it, nor is it necessary. So September 7th looks like it's the day and we're going to accept that. All right. I'm wondering if the two of our guests, special guests at the front red table would like to say anything else today.
Good.
Okay. You're smiling. You must be good.
I'm good.
All right.
I just appreciate the opportunity to be here in Cochise County and to do what we need to do with elections is to have integrity and fairness and transparency. And we have a good staff in place now. There's 3 of us full-time and then 1 part-time for each election. And so I think that we have a great sense of teamwork.
Good.
That's what it takes.
Thank you. That's good to hear. Mr. Karwachka.
Yeah, I just want to clarify based on Supervisor Crosby's comment, because he stated that there is an additional option of the elections director then reporting directly to the board and just having more meetings. And I just want to make sure that that isn't the opinion or direction that we need to move to, because if that's something that we want to move towards, then I have to do different resolutions and present that option to the board.
Generally, my opinion is that we should have more meetings to discuss things that are on a 30-item agenda. So I would be in favor of more meetings across the board to avoid the problems that frequently occur, in my opinion.
I think that we hire an administrator carefully and that his oversight of our departments, we pretty much have to trust you. And you do talk to us a lot, not as a board, but independently. I don't feel like I've been left out of anything. And that's a trick, considering that you can't tell me what Mr. Crosby thinks or what Miss English thinks. That's a trick that you have managed very well. So I
Yet,
appreciate
if we
that.
meet as a board, and we don't have to worry about that, we can talk to each other as
Yeah.
much as we want about whatever the
And
agenda items are.
I think today's a good example of that. We've a whole day not on a regular board meeting. We're having all kinds of fun times to meet and talk. And we can. I approve of meeting more often. I do. It's difficult because of the situation, but on board meeting days, it's fairly easy for me.
I don't think it's that difficult either because we have electronic.
That's true. It's not that difficult, actually. But I wanna
in
be
my
here.
opinion, I think that we need to move forward with moving the administrative and supervisory responsibility for the elections department to the county administrator. That will be my
Mhm.
goal.
And that's what I'm after too. That's what I expected would happen and haven't been convinced that there's something else should happen today. So I think that that's our direction to go ahead. Thank you. Any other comments by board members? Okay, it is time to, time to adjourn this meeting. And our next meeting 10 a.m. and we will have a special meeting at 10 a.m.